Well, peak organisation for young people is getting its members out on the streets to welcome in the carbon tax.
But for members of the Australian Youth Climate Coalition who are out in Sydney and Melbourne this morning, the carbon price scheme is not enough. The Climate Coalition's National Director is Ellen Sandell, and she joins us now from Melbourne. Good morning. Thanks for your time. Now, we've just seen this morning that carbon tax support is at an all-time low of 33%. Is this still an issue that young people care about?
Absolutely. We've got our members out on the streets in Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra today saying thank you to Australians for accepting this big change. We know that it's hard. All big, important reforms can be a little difficult, but it's really important that we are tackling a big issue that's important for our future, and we're really proud to be tackling climate change, so we're out saying thank you to people today.
Why do you think support for the carbon tax is so low?
Look, I think there's a number of factors. Like I said, any big reform can be really difficult. If you look at big reforms throughout history, when we change from things like a typewriter to the computer, of course people they don't want change, and there are vested interests who have an interest in keeping the status quo. And we've also seen the opposition and big polluters out there with the big scare campaign deliberately trying to confuse people about the carbon price. So I think there's a number of factors. But I think as we see it come into force and as people realise why we're actually doing this, I'm hoping that support for action on climate change will increase.
But there, of course, has been a lot of criticism that the carbon tax won't necessarily bring down emissions on its own. You think Australia should do more?
Yeah, well, we think this is a really good first step. If you look at what it's supposed to do, it is essentially putting a price on pollution so that big businesses can't pollute the air for free anymore. And we know that businesses, when they're looking at the bottom line, they will absolutely take that into effect. So it will have an impact in terms of businesses switching to cleaner energy and then investing that money in things like renewable energy. The world is moving on climate change, and the science says we do need to do more. So we absolutely do need to do more if we're going to protect the Australian economy and our young people, but it's a really good first step.
What compensation as a result of the carbon tax is there for students and young people?
There's quite a lot actually. Students who are on youth allowance will receive a direct payment, and also the increasing of the tax threshold is actually really good for young people. A lot of them earn less than $18,000 a year, and increasing the tax-free threshold in that regard is actually really good for students. So most students will be better off, but I don't think we need to just talk about purely in monetary terms. Are people going to be better off? We need to look at why we're doing this in the first place, and it's a big reform that's really good for young Australians' future, and that's why we support it.
Ellen Sandell, we thank you very much for braving the conditions in Melbourne this morning. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Karina.